Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the voice behind ThatKaitoDan, and welcome to my review for RWBY Volume 7 Episode 3, Ace Operatives. Before we begin though, as ever, please make sure you watch the episode first through roosterteeth.com to support the show and the amazing people behind it. Also, if you haven't seen my now block-free reaction to the Volume 2nd episode, links in the description and the card above. On the topic of episode 2, let's share some viewer comments from the review for that episode, because there were a lot of interesting opinions. Obviously, two of the biggest talking points were Ironwood's plans and Ruby's choice to keep secrets from the General, and several of you guys kept the debate going on in the comments, like the intriguingly named No One, who felt Ruby's actions were understandable, especially in regards to trust and the role that Ozpin still plays in all this, while Geek Goddess touched on Ironwood's confidence in his plans and a possible insight into how Penny might be a part of his plans. And finally, Smith Danigans wanted to give some deserved respect to Kiersey Burkhart, one of the new writers for the show alongside Eddie Rivas, who did a strong job with her first solo episode writing gig for the series. Don't forget, if you want to possibly see your comment featured in the next viewer comments segment, leave them down in the comments down below and tune in next week to see if you made the cut. So last week's episode did turn down the pace a touch for some vital discussions, setting up the arc's hurdles and some foundations for certain character motivations. And a lot of seeds were planted for some potential drama, which, like I said, caused quite the stir amongst the fans. But I felt it was still a worthwhile watch. However, will I say the same for this episode, or was it a total mission failure? Let's find out. We start off right in the mix as Ruby and company are joining the Aesops for a mission out in the Atlas Tundra. They need to clear the area of Grimm for it to be the launch site for the Amity Communications Tower. But there's a bit of a problem, and I'm not talking about how the mission screen shows the now licensed Huntsman youths in their new looks before they've actually gotten changed. No, I'm talking about the Geistgrim that's been causing trouble in the area, and the group need to take it out if they also hope to make use of the dust that's left in an abandoned mine nearby. In between this mission briefing, we finally get what fans have been waiting for since the initial reveals back at RTX earlier this year: the new outfits and weapon upgrades, thanks to Pietro. And though sadly we don't get any real moment of worth with guys like Blake or Weiss as they add some personal touches to their new looks, we do have a moment alone with Jean. Of course, back in August, Jean finally got some sense snapped into him to not let his grief over Pyrrha's death lead him on a path of self-destruction. And though he's still clearly wounded by the loss, we do see that this change of gear is a chance for Jean to really dedicate himself to getting his life back on track. And there's one change in particular that I just have to sing some praise for in how it's set up. Now, most fans knew that Jean was going to be getting a drastically different haircut along with his upgraded attire for this volume. What I absolutely adore about this scene is how the visual directing added deeper context to this new change, by having his long fringe fall over his eyes during his thinking of Pyrrha and his promise. Without a single spoken bit of dialogue, Jean's facial expression clues the viewer in that he'll then cut his hair as a symbolic physical change to cement his drive to improve himself and become the huntsman that Pyrrha believed he could be. A character having an important haircut like this is a classic trope seen in all kinds of other works, and the RWBY gave this the perfect establishment in just a few seconds, again with no dialogue, only some brilliant visual storytelling. It's subtle, but it adds so much weight to something that's gonna last a long time after this scene, and that deserves due praise for those who helped craft it. And now we get to see everyone all dressed up in their fresh new looks, which calls for a bit of showboating skydiving to a brand new vocal song. Currently called Touch the Sky by fans, this beautiful piano-backed snippet carries such a hopeful feel to it that emphasizes just how far some of these lot have come since some of their darker days, whilst adding some happy vibes to the flair and fun of the team's airdrop. It's short, sweet, and full of heart, and I'm definitely eager to hear this one in full, that's for sure. Also, I'd be remiss to not mention that we do see Blake's Gamble Shroud has its blade fixed, thanks to another symbolic addition, a bit of yang coloured metal. Sadly, I do wish we had a scene where Blake and Yang discuss the events where it broke in the first place, and some of the deeper context to this golden fixture. But alas, I guess this is one for the fanfics to explore for now. So, Team RWBY are joined by Marrow and my favourite of the Aesop's bunch, Harriet, we'll see why soon enough. Meanwhile, Elm and Vine join Ren, Nora and Jean, which gives us a chance to see their new looks in action too. And we see after 7 volumes, Jean has also finally gained a landing strategy, using his shield's newly gained hardlight dust edges to create a glider with his shield, using some gravity dust as well in the crest to make for a cushion blast. They grow up so fast. And finally, we see Clover is joined by Crow, who we can also now see in his new clothes in better quality this time. And I gotta say, it's not half bad. It's a bit weird seeing so much of his neckline without his old cross necklace, and the muted browns do make for a nice colour mix-up that still fits the character. Plus, the pattern on his sleeves is a unique new touch that I actually kinda dig. It also makes me think of Ozpin actually, which could be a purposeful connection. Oh, and also, everyone now has nifty new scrolls that can work in a compact form too. Only the best, I guess, when working with Atlas. So, shall we discuss them bees? Oh boy, this is going to feed Bumblebee shippers like a full-course meal. And speaking as one myself, I did genuinely love this little moment of Yang failing hard to hide her staring at Blake's new short hair, which, much like the Gamble Shroud fix, could have done with a scene exploring why the change happened and some of the deeper context to it, but much like Jean's haircut, we can at least assume it is due to wanting further inspirational change and a new chapter in her life post the final clash with Adam. And back to the scene itself, it's just incredibly charming, and both Aaron and Barbara do a wonderful job with the awkward flirting, as you'd expect for two youths still trying to understand their feelings and get used to some of these sweet moments of awkward glances. But before we press on, the RWBY girls take a moment to talk about the chat with Ironwood, and more importantly, the fact that RWBY chose to hide what really happened with Ozpin, as well as some of the truths about Salem and Jin's remaining question. I'm glad to see that it didn't take long for this scene to come around, especially with some folks in the fandom fearing that it wouldn't happen, or at least not this soon. And it turns out that RWBY's reasoning is about what I expected. Ironwood's current nature and some of his actions, while seemingly well-intentioned, is cause for concern, and considering what happened with the last time that these lot kept faith in a shady acting headmaster, it is best to hold off on some heavy details, at least until they can feel 100% confident that such a big decision won't come with big consequences. I am happy to see the crew be being alert to what the fans would be thinking by addressing it as soon as possible, as well as showing that RWBY's thought process matched that of her teammates. Having more than one brain following the same thought process makes the concern come off as more well-founded than if it was just down to the decision of one person. Though, just cause they're all in agreement doesn't mean that there won't be any backlash. I can't imagine James would be appreciative of the others not trusting him with such details, especially when he's already on edge as it is. And I do fear it's a case of when, not if, he'll learn the truth and do something more problematic that will cause a big divide amongst him and the other heroes, and by extension, further the divide between Atlas and the people of Mantle. There's also a brief discussion on how Oscar felt about this, and in a flashback to earlier, where the farm boy is being trusted with the lamp while staying at Atlas, he raises the same question that many of the fans have also had too. Aren't they doing the exact same thing that Ozpin did, which they antagonized him for previously? Once again, the RWBY knew the fans would be up in arms about this hypocritical decision, and showed that they will address it in time. We don't get RWBY's full response to Oscar's query, but the stage is set for RWBY to discuss the subject when there's more time allowed for it. For such a deep-rooted topic, it does need some time to breathe, not amongst everything that happens in this episode. Back on track, and each of the group makes their way into the mine's tunnels. Clover and Crow doing so while discussing Crow's not used to working with others. Meanwhile, with John, Nora, Ren, Elm and Vine, we have a little moment with the Renora pair that's turned a few heads, as Nora's compliment about Ren's new look gets shot down, the ninja wanting to focus on the mission at hand instead of anything else. This indeed did surprise a few people. Ren and Nora, the pair that most will agree has had the best chemistry in the series and has grown to show more affection to one another in recent volumes, have suddenly hit a bump in their relationship. But I do like it. And trust me, it's not out of character for Ren, despite what some may believe. The World of RWBY book did mention that Ren tends to avoid voicing his true feelings, something that we can look back on and see is correct, when he only really does so in moments of calm outside of missions, or in moments of emotional outbursts, like when he feared for Nora's safety during the fight with Cordovan. Ren's never been the kind of person that's been deeply expressive, or at least as honest with his emotions as Nora is, and I am curious to see what this little wrinkle in their relationship will grow into. How will Nora cope with Ren keeping his focus on something other than herself? And how will Ren learn to balance his feelings for Nora with stuff like missions? It's a new edge to their relationship that gives these two something to work on, which should mean that they won't be left in the background, as they kinda have been for the last 2 volumes. As for the main group, they first got to deal with a roadblock to their entryway, which may have been as a result of a previous accident caused by a dust explosion. And with Blake saying that she knows about this particular incident, it makes me think that this could have been where Ilya's parents died. They both died in a dust mine explosion according to Ilya, and this was around the time that she was masquerading as a human girl in an Atlas school, and the mocking response to this tragedy led to her joining the White Fang, and then forming her bond with Blake. So it's very possible that Blake learned of this location from Ilya, and if that is the case, great job from the RWBY utilizing this element to cement Ilya's history and give more atmosphere to this location, without bluntly describing it. And it's also good to see Weiss share a moment with Blake, wishing that she could make up for her father's actions and her complacency to change things in the past. I really do hope that these two in particular have some very strong moments dealing with the Faunus and SDC issues in Atlas, as their unity could provide some compelling drama and growth for their respective narratives. By the way, while I didn't catch this in my reaction, I did notice that during Maro jumping into the conversation, Blake gets distracted by a familiar branding on a crate, the same SDC brand that we saw on Adam's eye. Clearly, the ending fate of her old partner and the fight itself still lingers in Blake's head, and Yang notices this reaction as well, so hopefully we'll see these two address what happened last volume as they look to properly move on for the better. Also, can I just say that I really do hate jump scares? Those cheeky buggers at the RWBY hit us with 2 in this episode, the worst being the Geist spooking Blake in the dark before scampering off to fight the others, at the same time causing enough chaos to awaken some Sentinels, a new centipede breed of Grim that's just all kinds of gross. But they do make for good target practice, and this is where we get to see the new weapon upgrades in action. First, there's Yang, who now has remote-controlled detonators that she can punch into enemies, which is a definite welcome addition as she needs some more tactical moves in her arsenal. Meanwhile, RWBY can switch which side her scythe's blade can face for some added slicing freedom, Jean has his new hard light and gravity dust features on his shield, and Ren can shoot out the blades on his Stormflowers to repel into foes from a distance. Very cool new additions indeed, though that does still leave Weiss, Blake, and Nora. Do they have new upgrades? Blake's could just be her repairs. I can't really picture where Weiss would improve Mirtanasta, and Nora did have that energy storing upgrade shown once in the Volume 4 premiere, so maybe they're just sticking to that, or these are upgrades that we're going to be seeing later on. To make up for this at least, we also get to see how the Aesops fight, and what skills they use. The first being Harriet, who we know from the opening can move super fast, but that's actually her semblance. Her weapon is twin robotic gauntlets that can break through a solid wall or a sentinel in one punch. Marrow, meanwhile, is pretty sharp with his boomerang throws and gunfire, but his ace in the hole is the ability to freeze an enemy in place. The dude pulled a Zarudo with just a snap of his fingers. At least he didn't say, "Sit, boy!" It also looks like Marrow can't move when he does this, which could also tie into his origin, the dog and its reflection. He's reflecting the lack of mobility that his target has, meaning Marrow needs to count on others, like Harriet, to get the final blow. A nice little caveat to that power. Then we also see that Vine Zeki can create aura limbs that stretch out like vines, while M can make like a tree and plant herself in the ground, thus explaining her fighting in bare feet, which is pretty cool too, and it gives these two some unique skill sets which we'll see more of later on. As for the Aesop's leader, we see Clover and Crow dealing with the Geistgrim before it takes over some nearby ice, rock and metal to become a chilly version of a Petragigas. And after Crow manages to warn Clover before his bad luck nearly gets him hurt, we learn that Clover does indeed have a good luck semblance, as many of us have speculated. Mind you, he doesn't really explain how it works and if he has any control over it like Crow doesn't, but it does help solidify Clover as this sort of counterfigure to Crow. And I can see how it will add some fascinating quirks between these two and their dynamic. Perhaps Clover will show him that it is possible to count on other people again, even with such a sporadic power. Having Crow learn to trust and work with a team again, I think is a great new hurdle for the wounded warrior to try and overcome, after he started to rebuild himself post his breakdown in Volume 6. And I am curious to see what this partnership with Clover could do to test Crow, and put him in a stronger position after being this lone wolf for so long. Eventually everyone regroups in a big open area of the mine with some extremely active dust crystals. One wrong move and the place goes boom, which makes it troublesome then that this is where the Gigas has ended up, complete with some newly absorbed dust crystals. But while the kids are too busy trying to figure out how to fight this beast safely without the whole place going sky high, the Aesops show their experience by diving on in and really showing their talents. You got Vine and Elm working flawlessly together to keep the big beast in place, while leaving its vulnerable spots open for Marrow to trim down with his boomerang. And should any dust crystals come loose, Harriet is able to go full on Sonic the Hedgehog by bolting around the place in some super slick sequences to catch the crystals before they hit the ground. Once Clover and Crow make it to the scene, the Aesops finally go to town on the giant, and the camera work does a fantastic job at keeping up with their pace, their athleticism, and their smooth teamwork, with each member fulfilling their own role to perfection, leaving Crow prime and ready to rip the Geist out with a lucky cast of his fishing line and turning this catch of the day into a sitting duck for Harriet to uppercut. But there is a chance for one of the kids to make their mark, as RWBY manages to beat Harriet in a test of speed to catch one of the remaining dust crystals, a feat that actually did impress Harriet. This was an element that I was very happy to see, as I feared with Harriet and her competitive edge, she would become that classic antagonistic person who, when beaten, would insult the other person just because they were slightly better than them. But she actually praised RWBY's ability, and even made an interesting bit of analysis that comes with past experience with other speed semblance users. To RWBY's confusion, Harriet thinks that there might be more to RWBY's semblance than she currently thinks, implying that if RWBY gets some more experience and training, she could be able to unlock the true strength in her semblance. Maybe we'll see more of that teleportation aspect that was discussed in the World of RWBY book? This really excites me, as I've long been curious about how semblances evolve and grow. We've heard talk about this back in Volume 3 when Winter was talking about semblances with her sister being like a muscle. The more you train it, the stronger it will become, and eventually you might be able to achieve greater feats, and I want to see more of that growth on display. It's very much like how quirks in My Hero Academia work, and I love that aspect in that show, so hopefully we'll see it test the cast here, not just for RWBY, but for everyone. And so, the mission is a success. Everyone is safe, the Geist is taken out, and they've gotten some dust for the comms tower. A happy ending, right? Well, no. Sadly, there is a sour note that this episode ends on, and it's with our old exuberant Robin Hill supporter, Forrest, who is free from police custody, only to end up in an alleyway with Tyrion. And with some unsettling talk about wanting to shake things up in Mantle, the freaky Faunus kills Forrest in cold blood. Rest in peace, Forrest. #RWBY will live on always. But yeah, taking things seriously now, Tyrion's really up to no good in the Mantle streets. He's already killed someone before in the last episode, and is likely behind the death of the reporter that was shown in the premiere episode. Now he's killing someone that, even though they don't really have any real importance, is somewhat connected to Robin Hill. Safe bet in terms of why he's doing this has to be that Tyrion wants to make Mantle even more of a dangerous town, to further rally the locals and their desire for someone like Robin to inspire change. But if this coincides with what Watts is doing and how he may rig the votes to possibly have Jacques win, this would only cause a fever pitch in Mantle and spark some riots perhaps. At least that's what I'm envisioning to be the bad guy's scheme. Of course, we know Tyrion will also likely clash with Robin herself at some point thanks to the opening, but it's going to be curious to see what Robin makes of all these shady goings on, and I hope that the next episode is where she finally is introduced, so we can start to get a scope on her mindset. But that's the future. Let's talk a little bit more about the present and how much I genuinely love this episode. The RWBY nailed it top to bottom, to where my only real issues with the episode were just me wanting certain scenes with the outfit changes, and even that's not enough to knock this episode's positives down a peg. Obviously, given the episode title, this was the big showcase for the Aesops, both as fighters and as characters, and we got to see more of their personality quirks, their skill set, how they work well together, and most importantly, how they interact with our staple cast, and I felt they each offered something exciting to the table in very entertaining fashions. Clover set himself well as this counter-reflection to Crow, which should push him to some new maturity. Meanwhile, Marrow and Harriet intertwine themselves with some of the gang in intriguing comments and some very fun action, while Elm and Vine perhaps lean more towards a lesser example of this, but their interactions may be small, they still made a big impact in some ways, like how they feel like a older, more experienced version of Ren and Nora, which hopefully leads to some worthwhile growth there too, and they still showcase some excellent skill at working in tandem with others. They've each began to build some kind of link to the main cast, which helps us in turn start to invest in them and build a connection early on before whatever happens later in the volume. And it helps this episode gain a measure of importance, as on the surface there's not really a lot in terms of major narrative progression. But with these moments of bonding and getting to see how the Aesops can inspire our heroes, it at least makes sure that there is some long-term booking going on. That's not to say that we didn't get anything of quality that did affect the main plot, because the RWBY, like I said before, wisely addressed concerns from the previous episode in short, focused discussions, touching base on some of the issues in a logical way, while still saving the fuller discussion for the future episodes. The pacing was wisely structured, so the talk about Ruby's decision and beyond didn't bog down the events in the mines, but they still needed to be touched on, and they did so in some very quick and easy manageable ways. There was also some small nuggets of world building, like the deeper implications of the mine explosion, more reasons to fear what Tyrion is up to in Mantle, and a lot of strong character moments, some of which included some expertly utilized moments of show don't tell, such as Jean's moments of reflection, and Blake and Yang's expressions when looking at the SDC brand. There was a lot of positives in terms of just seeing the new gear in action for the first time. There was also some cool insight into how RWBY's combat growth could actually take a new step forward with a semblance. And there was of course the Blake and Yang scene that will no doubt be a fondly remembered moment for some time. And that action. Not only was it cool to see the new upgrades with the creepy sentinels as target practice, the grand battle with the Gigas in the active dust zone was the perfect obstacle to show how highly trained the Aesops are, so they can become the bar for our main heroes to try and reach. With Harriet's many speedy runs unquestionably standing out as some of the best visual moments in the fight, with the camera, speed, and flow being pitch perfect to really sell her incredible mobility and velocity. And with that, I think it's time to give out some awards, starting with the character of the episode, which I'm going to give to Miss Harriet Bree. I know I said that she's currently my favourite in the Aesops, and for me, this episode helped solidify that. Not only was she captivating to watch in action, I greatly admired the direction her character is on, where she could actually have been written as this blunt badass that was kinda hard to like, but instead, her aggressive competitiveness comes with an act of kindness and support for those that she respects. This also plays into why her voice actress, Aneris Quinones, gets the voice acting gold star, as she helped display that positive side to her personality to where it could have been floundered if her voice wasn't able to balance both sides of Harriet's personality. And finally, there's the scene of the episode, and I could fairly give it to the epic Gigas battle or the Bumblebee moment, but these awards go to the factors that I feel were either undoubtedly the best of the episode, or were elements that surprised me in its quality. So that's why I'm giving this award to the wonderful visual storytelling with Jean's moment alone before he got his haircut, and how it added context to this new part of his design. So, 3 episodes in, and I think we got my favourite of the trio so far. Again, while it's not going to be the most important of episodes in the grand scheme of things, this chapter still managed to deliver a thrill ride of action that did wonders for the new faces, and was aided with some moments of directive and character gold. Now it feels like we're truly immersed into the setting after exploring the initial first pages of the narrative, so hopefully with the groundwork laid out, now the volume will be able to press on and begin diving into the real meat of this tale. But for this episode, I can definitely say that it was mission success. But what do you guys think? It's time to make sure you all tell me so they could possibly feature in the next review. Did you enjoy the fight in the mines? Have any opinions changed on the new looks for the team? And what do you think about the Aesops now that we got to see them in action? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons and tick the notification box to make sure you get every new video from me as they drop. And follow me on Twitter at ThatKaitoDan for more on all kinds of updates regarding RWBY reactions, reviews, even other stuff, and more. But until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace out.